Before we dive into the story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more heart-touching tales. Wishing you a beautiful day now. Sit back and enjoy the story. Asterisk, the confession hung in the air between them like smoke from a dying cigarette. Camila's words had left her lips before she could stop them. 3 simple sentences that shattered the careful distance she'd maintained for weeks. Lorenzo sat frozen across the small cafe table, his green eyes wide with something she couldn't name. Shock? Disgust? Pity? "I've never been with anyone," she had whispered, her voice barely audible above the jazz quartet playing in the corner. "Of Calf Central, 22 years old, and I've never... I thought you should know before this goes any further." The historic center of Mexico City buzzed around them through the tall windows. Street vendors called out their wares while couples strolled hand in hand down the cobblestone streets. The late afternoon sun cast golden shadows across Lorenzo's face, highlighting the sharp angles of his jaw and the way his perfectly styled black hair caught the light. But none of that mattered now, only the silence stretching between them like a chasm. Lorenzo's hand, which had been reaching across the table toward hers, slowly withdrew, leaned back in his chair, and Camila watched as his expression shifted. From surprise to something darker, more complicated. "Why are you telling me this?" His voice had lost its earlier warmth, replaced by a careful neutrality that made her stomach clench. Camila's cheeks burned with humiliation. She'd imagined this conversation a dozen different ways during sleepless nights in her cramped apartment. In some versions, he had smiled and told her it didn't matter. In others, he had kissed her right there in the cafe. But in none of her fantasies had he looked at her like she was something fragile that might break if touched. "Because I'm tired of pretending to be someone I'm not," she said, lifting her chin despite the tremor in her voice. "You want to know me better? This is who I am. A scholarship student from Puebla who works 2 jobs and has never had time for romance. If that's not what you're looking for, then we should end this before it starts." Lorenzo's green eyes searched her face, and she saw something flicker there. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. "You think I care about that?" he asked quietly. "Don't you?" The question hung between them as the cafe's atmosphere seemed to shift around them. The jazz quartet transitioned into a melancholy ballad, and the golden afternoon light began to fade toward evening. Other patrons continued their conversations, oblivious to the moment unfolding at the corner table. Lorenzo leaned forward again, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Camila, I need to tell you something too." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "What? This isn't just attraction for me. What I'm feeling, it's not normal. It's not safe." His hands gripped the edge of the table until his knuckles went white. "I don't do relationships. I don't do emotional connections. My life is structured to avoid exactly what's happening right now. What's happening right now? I'm falling for a woman I can't have." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Can't have because I'm not sophisticated enough? Because I don't belong in your world? Because I'm dangerous?" The rawness in his voice made her breath catch. "Because everyone who gets close to me ends up hurt. Because my family's business isn't just hotels, Camila. And because if my father finds out about you, he'll destroy everything you care about." The cafe suddenly felt too small, too warm. Camila's psychology training kicked in, analyzing his body language, the way his shoulders tensed, the slight tremor in his hands. This wasn't rejection. This was fear. "What aren't you telling me?" Lorenzo's laugh held no humor. "More than you want to know. Try me." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with visible effort, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. His fingers moved quickly across the screen before he turned it toward her. The news article's headline made her blood run cold. "Castellano Empire under federal investigation for money laundering allegations." "My inheritance isn't just luxury hotels, Camila. It's a legacy I've been trying to escape my entire adult life." His voice was steady now, resigned. "Every business dinner you served me at the hotel? Those weren't just expansion meetings. They were damage control sessions. My father is being investigated by both Mexican and international authorities." Camila stared at the phone screen, her mind reeling. "Are you saying I'm saying that dating me could make you an accessory to crimes you've never even imagined. I'm saying that my father would see you as a weakness to be eliminated. I'm saying that what I feel for you is real, but acting on it could get you killed. The chair scraped against the floor as she stood abruptly. The cafe spun around her as the full weight of his revelation settled in. This wasn't a fairy tale romance between a waitress and a billionaire. This was something darker, more dangerous, than anything she had prepared herself for. "I need air," she whispered. "Camila, wait." But she was already pushing through the cafe's heavy wooden doors, emerging into the cool evening air of the historic center. The sounds of the city rushed back in, overwhelming, after the intimate quiet of their conversation. Streetlights were beginning to flicker on, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. Behind her, she heard the door open again. Camila. She turned to face him. This man who had just revealed himself to be everything her mother had warned her against. Lorenzo stood in the doorway of the cafe, his expensive suit rumpled, his perfect composure finally cracked. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I want you to run," he said quietly. "I want you to go back to your studies and your job and forget you ever met me. And what do you want for yourself?" The pause stretched between them as evening shoppers and tourists moved around them like water around stones. When Lorenzo finally spoke, his words were barely audible above the city's din. "I want to be selfish enough to ask you to stay." 3 days passed in a haze of uncertainty. Camila threw herself into her morning psychology classes with desperate focus. Taking notes with the intensity of someone trying to drown out her own thoughts, the lecture hall at Universidad Nacional felt smaller than usual, the professor's voice distant as she wrestled with Lorenzo's revelation. "Miss Rodriguez." Professor Viga's sharp tone cut through her distraction. "Since you seem so absorbed in your notes, perhaps you can explain the psychological impact of moral injury on decision-making." Heat flooded Camila's face as 30 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Moral injury occurs when an individual perpetrates, witnesses, or fails to prevent acts that violate their moral beliefs, often leading to psychological trauma that affects future ethical choices. Precisely. And how might this apply to someone caught between loyalty and justice? The question felt like a direct blow. Camila's grip tightened on her pen. The individual might experience cognitive dissonance, leading to rationalization of harmful behaviors or complete withdrawal from moral decision-making altogether. Excellent. Moving on. But Camila couldn't move on. The academic discussion felt too close to her reality, where she found herself torn between the Lorenzo, who had looked at her with genuine affection, and the man, who had admitted to being part of something criminal. Her phone buzzed during the break between classes. An unknown number, but she recognized the message style immediately. "I know you said you needed time to think, but there's something else you need to know. Something that changes everything. Can you meet me tonight? I'll understand if you say no." Camila stared at the screen until the words blurred. Rosa found her there in the hallway, frozen with indecision. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Rosa said, sliding her books into her bag. "Still thinking about your billionaire?" "He texted me, and there's more. More secrets, more complications." Camila showed Rosa the message. "Says it changes everything." Rosa read it twice before looking up with concern. "Camila, this sounds like a man trying to manipulate you. What could he possibly tell you that would make his criminal family acceptable? Maybe it's not what you think. Or maybe it's exactly what I think, and you're too infatuated to see clearly." Rosa's voice softened. "Remember what happened to your cousin Alina? She fell for a man with secrets too. It took her 3 years to rebuild her life after he disappeared. With her savings, and left her to answer to his creditors?" The comparison stung because it wasn't entirely unfair. But something in Lorenzo's eyes during their conversation had felt different from the smooth manipulation Rosa described.
Ow.
There had been genuine pain there, real fear.
Ow.
"One meeting," Camila said finally. "I'll hear what he has to say, and then I'll decide. Promise me you'll meet him somewhere public. Promise me you'll tell someone where you're going. I promise." But that evening, as Camila stood outside the address Lorenzo had given her, she realized her first promise would be impossible to keep. The location was a private art gallery in Polanco, one of Mexico City's most exclusive neighborhoods. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see expensive paintings illuminated by soft spotlights. But no other patrons. Her phone buzzed. I rented the gallery for privacy. I know how this looks, but I needed somewhere we could talk without being overheard. The security guard will let you in. Every instinct her mother had drilled into her screamed danger. Don't go into private spaces with powerful men. Don't let yourself be isolated. Don't trust pretty words from someone who has everything to gain from your naivety. But she pushed through the glass doors. Anyway, the gallery was a study in understated luxury. Abstract paintings in vibrant blues and golds covered white walls, while soft classical music played from hidden speakers. The space smelled of expensive perfume and fresh flowers. Lorenzo stood with his back to her, studying a painting of a woman's silhouette against a stormy sky. He had traded his usual business suit for dark jeans and a simple white shirt that somehow made him look more dangerous than formal wear ever could. "Thank you for coming," he said without turning around. "You said something changes everything." Does? He finally faced her, and she saw exhaustion in his features that hadn't been there 3 days ago. Dark circles shadowed his green eyes, and his usually perfect hair looked like he'd been running his hands through it. "But first, I need you to understand why I've been trying to protect you." He gestured to a leather folder on a nearby bench. "Federal investigators approached me 6 months ago. They want me to testify against my father in exchange for immunity." Camila's breath caught. "You're working with the police?" "I'm trying to find a way out of my family's business without ending up dead." His voice was steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "My father doesn't know yet. But if he finds out, if anyone in our organization suspects I'm cooperating with federal agents, I won't be the only one who pays the price." "What does this have to do with me?" Lorenzo moved closer, and she caught his scent, something expensive, and masculine that made her pulse quicken despite everything. "2 days ago, someone took photographs of us at the cafe. Professional quality, telephoto lens. They were delivered to my hotel room with no message." The implications hit her like ice water. Someone knows about us. Someone is watching us. "Which means meeting you here was probably the stupidest thing I've ever done, but I needed you to understand." He opened the folder and showed her official-looking documents with government letterheads. "I'm not the criminal you think I am, but I'm not innocent either." Camila studied the papers, her psychology training helping her recognize authentic body language versus deception. Everything about Lorenzo's posture screamed truth, from the way he held himself to the genuine fear in his eyes. "Why are you showing me this? Because I'm in love with you?" The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Camila's heart stopped, then began racing so fast she felt dizzy. "You barely know me. I know you work 2 jobs to pay for your education while sending money to your family. I know you order your coffee with extra sugar because you grew up without enough sweet things in your life. I know you bite your lower lip when you're concentrating, and that you haven't been sleeping since our conversation at the cafe." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I know that when you smile at hotel guests, it's professional courtesy. But when you smiled at me that first night, it was real." Tears she hadn't realized were building began to fall. "Lorenzo, I know this is insane. I know I have no right to feel this way about someone I've put in danger just by existing. Need you to know that everything I've told you, every warning I've given you, comes from a place of caring about what happens to you." She took a shaky breath. "What are you asking of me?" "I'm asking you to disappear. Take this." He held out an envelope. "There's enough money inside to finish your degree somewhere else, somewhere safe. I'm asking you to hate me enough to save yourself." Camila stared at the envelope like it might bite her. "And if I don't, then we're both probably going to die." The gallery fell silent except for the soft classical music and the sound of her own heartbeat in her ears. Through the windows, Mexico City glittered in the darkness. Millions of people living their lives unaware of the impossible choice being offered in this expensive room. "There's a third option," she said quietly. "There isn't. What if I help you?" Lorenzo's face went white. "Absolutely not. I'm studying psychology. I understand human behavior, manipulation, deception. What if I could help you navigate this situation without getting us both killed?" "Camila, you don't understand what you're suggesting." Then explain it to me." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, with visible reluctance, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone again. This time, the photo he showed her made her stomach turn. It was a crime scene image, clearly official, showing a young woman's body in what looked like a warehouse. The victim appeared to be around Camila's age, with similar dark hair and features. "Her name was Isabella Santos," Lorenzo said quietly. "She was an art student who got involved with someone in my father's organization. She tried to help him escape. This is what happened to her." Camila forced herself to look at the image, to really see it, despite every instinct telling her to turn away. "How long ago?" "For months. Before you started working with federal investigators." "Yes, so now you have government protection." Theory. Camila handed his phone back and met his eyes directly. "I'm not Isabella Santos, not an art student in over her head. I'm a psychology major who has spent her entire life reading people and surviving in situations where one wrong move could cost everything. This isn't the same thing, isn't it? Do you think growing up poor doesn't teach you about danger? You think working in hotels serving drunk rich men doesn't require survival skills? You think I've made it this far by being naive?" Lorenzo stared at her, and she saw the exact moment when his perception of her shifted. The protective concern remained, but it was joined by something else. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I'm proposing we stop pretending. I'm some innocent victim who needs rescuing, and start figuring out how to outsmart whoever is threatening us both." The silence stretched between them, filled with possibility and terror in equal measure. Finally, Lorenzo spoke, his voice carefully controlled. "If we do this, there's no going back. Once you're part of this world, even as someone trying to escape it, you're marked forever, and if we don't do this, you disappear. I testify against my father, and we spend the rest of our lives wondering what might have been." Camila thought of her mother's warnings, of Rosa's concerns, of every safe choice that had brought her to this moment. Then she thought of the way Lorenzo had looked at her in the cafe, of the genuine fear in his voice when he talked about her safety, of the federal documents that suggested he was trying to do the right thing in an impossible situation. The first step. The plan was deceptively simple. Camila would continue working at the Grand Palacio Hotel, maintaining her normal routine while serving as Lorenzo's eyes and ears. Her psychology training made her perfect for reading the subtle dynamics between his father's associates during their frequent business dinners. Meanwhile, Lorenzo would feed information to federal investigators while playing the role of dutiful heir. What neither of them anticipated was how quickly they would be tested. It started 2 weeks later on a Thursday evening that began like any other. Camila had finished her morning classes and was preparing for the evening shift when Rosa cornered her in their tiny apartment kitchen. "You're different," Rosa said bluntly, stirring instant coffee with more force than necessary. "You're distracted during classes, you're working extra shifts, and you keep checking your phone like you're expecting important news. I'm fine. You're lying." Rosa set down her mug and fixed Camila with the steady gaze that had made her an excellent psychology student. "What's really going on with this Lorenzo situation?" Camila had prepared for this conversation, but sitting across from her best friend, she found the rehearsed explanations dying in her throat. "It's complicated." "Complicated how?" "Complicated like you're sleeping with him, or complicated like you're in over your head with something dangerous?" The accuracy of Rose's guess made Camila's stomach clench. "What makes you think it's dangerous?" "Because I did some research." Rosa pulled out her laptop and opened a browser window. "Lorenzo Castellano isn't just rich, Camila. His family has connections to people who make other people disappear. There are rumors about money laundering, about business deals that involve more than hotels. Rumors aren't facts. Neither is whatever story he's told you to justify why you're taking risks for someone you barely know." Before Camila could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Lorenzo. "Emergency meeting. Plaza de la Constitution, North Side. Come alone." Rosa saw her expression change. "It's him, isn't it?" "I have to go. Camila, please." "Whatever he's asked you to do, it's not worth it." But Camila was already grabbing her jacket, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. The urgency in Lorenzo's message suggested something had gone wrong with their careful planning. The Plaza della Constitution was crowded with evening commuters and tourists, providing perfect cover for a clandestine meeting. Camila found Lorenzo, sitting on a bench near the cathedral wearing sunglasses despite the approaching sunset. His body language screamed tension. "What happened?" she asked, sitting beside him without preamble. "My father wants to meet you." The words hit her like ice water. "What?" "Someone told him about us. It's not the photographs, not our investigation. Someone who knows we've been meeting told him I'm involved with a hotel employee." Lorenzo's voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the fear underneath. "He's demanding I bring you to family dinner this Sunday." Camila's psychology training kicked in, analyzing the implications. This could be good. If he just thinks we're dating, if he doesn't know about the federal investigation, or it could be a trap. My father doesn't invite outsiders to family dinner unless he's planning something. What kind of something? Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment, watching tourists take photos in front of the cathedral. "The last woman I dated seriously was named Sofia Mendez. Beautiful, educated, from a good family. Everything my father thought was appropriate for his son. What happened to her?" She started asking questions about the family business. Innocent questions, the kind any girlfriend might ask. Where did all our money really come from? Why did we meet with certain people in private? Why were there always bodyguards around? Camila's mouth went dry. And she died in a car accident 3 weeks later, brake failure on a mountain road. Outside the city, the implications settled over her like a suffocating blanket. "You think he killed her?" "I think my father doesn't leave loose ends." They sat in silence as evening descended around them. The plaza began to empty as office workers headed home, and tourists returned to their hotels. In the gathering darkness, Mexico City felt more dangerous than Camila had ever noticed before. "We could run," she said quietly. "Take whatever information you've gathered to federal investigators and disappear into witness protection. With what evidence? Everything I've given them so far is circumstantial. They need more before they can move, and that means I need to stay embedded long enough to gather it. Then we go to dinner." Lorenzo turned to stare at her. "You're not hearing me? This could be a death sentence, or it could be an opportunity." Camila's mind was already racing through possibilities. Think about it from a psychological perspective. Your father is bringing me in because someone made him suspicious. But if I can convince him I'm just a naive waitress who's infatuated with his son, if I can make him believe I'm too innocent to be a threat, that's incredibly dangerous. Everything about this situation is dangerous. But playing the part of someone harmless might be safer than running and confirming his suspicions. Lorenzo studied her face in the dim light. "You're serious about this? I'm serious about surviving it? There are things you don't know about my family. Customs, expectations, ways of behaving that could get you killed if you get them wrong. Then teach me." The next 3 days became an intensive crash course in navigating high-stakes social dynamics. Lorenzo met Camila between her classes and work shifts, drilling her on family history, appropriate conversation topics, and the subtle behavioral cues that would mark her as either harmless or threatening. "Never ask direct questions," he instructed during one session in a quiet corner of the university library. "My family communicates through implication and subtext. Direct questions are seen as aggressive. What about eye contact? Respectful, but not challenging. Look at my father when he speaks to you, but don't hold his gaze too long. And your mother?" Lorenzo's expression darkened. "My mother died when I was 16. The woman you'll meet is Elena, my father's current wife. She's been part of the family for 3 years. What's she like?" "Smart, ambitious, potentially more. Dangerous than my father because she's better at hiding it." By Sunday evening, Camila felt as prepared as possible for a situation that could end with her disappearance. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a simple black dress that was elegant, but not expensive, minimal jewelry, understated makeup. The goal was to appear respectful and unthreatening. Lorenzo picked her up in his Maserati, but the luxury car felt more like a hearse as they drove through Mexico City's upscale neighborhoods toward his family's estate. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. "Remember? he said as they approached the gated community. "You're a psychology student who works at the hotel to pay for school. We met when I had dinner there. You come from a good but modest family in Puebla. You're studying to become a therapist because you want to help people. All true. The best lies usually are." The Castellano family estate sat behind high walls topped with security cameras. As they passed through the gates, Camila caught glimpses of manicured gardens, a fountain, and a house that looked more like a small palace. Everything spoke of money and power accumulated over generations. "One more thing," Lorenzo said as they approached the front entrance. "Whatever happens tonight, whatever you see or hear, act like the naive psychology student you're supposed to be. Don't let them see how intelligent you really are." The front door opened before they could ring the bell, revealing a woman in her 40s with sharp cheekbones and calculating eyes. She wore an expensive cream-colored dress that perfectly complemented her auburn hair and diamond jewelry. "Lorenzo, darling," her voice carried a slight European accent. "This must be Camila. Alina, this is Camila Rodriguez. Camila, my stepmother, Alina Castellano." "So lovely to meet you," Alina said, extending her hand with a smile that never reached her eyes. Roberto was waiting in the dining room. "I hope you're hungry." As they followed Alina through marble hallways lined with expensive art, Camila caught Lorenzo's hand and squeezed it once. He squeezed back. She drew strength from the brief contact. They were about to enter the most dangerous room of her life. The dining room was a study in intimidation disguised as elegance. A massive table sat beneath a crystal chandelier with place settings that probably cost more than Camila's monthly rent. And at the head of the table sat Roberto Castellano. He was smaller than she had expected, but his presence filled the room like smoke. Silver-haired and impeccably dressed, he watched her approach with dark eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of her appearance and behavior. "Papa," Lorenzo said, his voice carefully neutral. "This is Camila." Roberto stood and extended his hand, and when Camila took it, she felt like she was shaking hands with a predator. "Miss Rodriguez, I've heard so much about you." His smile was warm and paternal, but something in his tone made her blood run cold. As they took their seats around the massive table, Camila realized that the evening hadn't even begun, and she was already fighting for her life. Asterisk, the betrayal came during dessert for 2 hours. Camila had played her role perfectly. She had answered Roberto's questions about her family with just the right mix of pride and modesty. She had complimented Elena's choice in artwork without appearing too knowledgeable. She had laughed at Roberto's stories about Lorenzo's childhood. With genuine warmth, everything was going according to plan until Alina excused herself to take a phone call and returned with an expression that made the temperature in the room plummet. "Forgive the interruption," Alina said, retaking her seat with predatory grace. "But I've just received some interesting information about our guest." Camila's blood turned to ice, but she maintained her composed expression. Beside her, she felt Lorenzo stiffen. "Oh." Roberto's voice remained conversational, but his dark eyes sharpened with interest. "It seems Miss Rodriguez has been asking questions." Lena smiled, and the expression was more terrifying than anger would have been. "Questions about our family business, our associates, our financial arrangements. Very specific questions for a psychology student." The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Camila's mind raced through possibilities, but every escape route led to the same conclusion. Someone had betrayed them. "I'm afraid I don't understand," Camila said, proud that her voice remained steady. "Never asked questions about your business, haven't you?" Alina reached into her purse and withdrew a small digital recorder. 3 days ago, outside the university library, he asked Lorenzo quite specifically about money laundering charges against his father. The recording began to play. Camila's own voice filled the dining room. "The federal investigation your father mentioned, is it really about money laundering, or is there more to it?" Lorenzo's response followed. "There's always more to it. With my family, that's why I'm trying to get out before it's too late." Roberto's expression never changed, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Interesting dinner conversation for young lovers. Camila fought to keep breathing normally as her mind processed what had happened. The recording was real. The conversation had taken place, which meant someone had been following them, listening to their private moments for far longer than they had realized. "I can explain," Lorenzo said, but his father raised a hand for silence. "No need, son." "I think Miss Rodriguez's purpose here has become quite clear." Roberto's voice remained pleasant, but something deadly moved behind his eyes. "The question is whether she's working alone or if she has partners." "Mr. Castellano," Camila began, but Alina cut her off. "We know about the federal investigators, dear. We know about the meetings, the documents, the immunity deal. No. What we don't know is how much information has already been passed along." Room felt like a trap closing around her. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Camila could see the estate's security guards taking new positions around the perimeter. There would be no casual exit from this dinner. "You're making a mistake," she said, abandoning pretense. "I'm not working with any investigators, but Lorenzo is." Adeto's statement wasn't a question. "My son, whom I raised, whom I groomed, to inherit everything I've built, has been feeding information to federal agents in exchange for immunity from prosecution." Lorenzo met his father's gaze directly. Yes, the single word hung in the air like a death sentence. Elena's smile widened, and Roberto leaned back in his chair with something that might have been disappointment or might have been rage. "And Miss Rodriguez? She's innocent. She got involved with me, not with this." Innocent women don't record private conversations about federal investigations. Roberto gestured to the device Elena still held. "Innocent women don't ask psychology professors about the behavioral patterns of criminal informants." Camila's stomach dropped. "How do you know about that?" "'Cause Professor Vega has been on our payroll for 3 years, Elena said pleasantly. "Amazing what university employees will do for a little extra income. He's been keeping us informed about any students asking questions that might indicate federal interest in our family." The full scope of their surveillance became clear. They hadn't just been watching Lorenzo and Camila's meetings. They had people inside the university, inside the hotel, probably inside the federal investigation itself. "So now we come to the real question," Roberto continued. "What do we do with a son who betrays his family and a woman who helped him do it?" "I'll disappear," Camila said quickly. "I'll leave Mexico City, finish my degree somewhere else." "Never see me again, like Isabella Santos disappeared?" The name hit her like a physical blow. Roberto's smile was gentle, paternal even, but his words carried the weight of a grave threat. "Isabella thought she could help her boyfriend escape. Our family too. She thought love was stronger than loyalty. She was wrong." Papa Lorenzo's voice carried a warning. "Camila has nothing to do with Isabella, doesn't she? Both psychology students, both involved with men in our organization. Both convinced they could outsmart us." Roberto stood from his chair and walked to the window overlooking the garden. "The difference is that Isabella acted alone. Miss Rodriguez has been much more systematic in her approach." Lena reached into her purse again and withdrew a manila folder. "Bank records showing unusual deposits into your account, Miss Rodriguez. Hotel security footage of you photographing certain guests during business dinners. Phone records showing calls to numbers associated with federal investigators. Each piece of evidence hit like a hammer blow. The deposits were tips from Lorenzo. The photographs were pictures she had taken to help him identify his father's associates. The phone calls were to the number he had given her for emergencies. All innocent in context, all damning when viewed through the lens of suspicion." "You've been very thorough," Camila said quietly. "We've had to be. The federal investigation has made us very careful about who we trust." Roberto turned back to face them. "The question is whether your betrayal ends here in this room, or whether it continues to cause problems for our family." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that loyalty has to be earned, Miss Rodriguez, and betrayal has to be punished." The dining room fell silent except for the soft tick of an antique clock in the corner. Outside, security guards moved with practiced efficiency, their presence a reminder that escape was no longer an option. "There is, however, a third option," Alina said, her voice deceptively casual, "which is, you could work for us." The suggestion hung in the air like smoke. "Ah," Camila looked at Lorenzo, whose face had gone pale with understanding. "Work for you, how?" "The federal investigators trust you now, don't they? They see you as Lorenzo's innocent girlfriend who stumbled into something over her head. They would never suspect that you might be feeding them false information." The full horror of what Alina was proposing became clear. They wanted her to become a double agent, to betray the federal investigation while pretending to help it. If I refuse? Roberto's smile never wavered. Then you become another cautionary tale about the dangers of betraying family. Camila's mind raced through options, but every path led to the same conclusion. She was trapped. Refuse, and she would end up like Isabella Santos. Accept, and she would become complicit in whatever crimes the Castellano family was covering up. I need time to think about this, she said finally. Of course, Roberto said graciously. Alina, we'll show you to the guest room where you can consider your options. We'll discuss your decision in the morning. The words sounded like hospitality, but Camila understood them for what they were. She was now a prisoner, as Alina led her through marble hallways toward the guest wing. Camila caught one last glimpse of Lorenzo. He sat motionless at the dining table, his face a mask of controlled desperation. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, and in that moment she saw something that chilled her more than Roberto's threats. He was planning something. The guest room was luxurious and windowless, with a door that locked from the outside. Elena's smile never faltered as she showed Camila the amenities: expensive toiletries, silk pajamas, a basket of fruit and bottled water. I do hope you'll be comfortable, Alina said. Roberto can be quite persuasive once he's made up his mind about someone. I'm sure you'll make the right choice. After Alina left, Camila heard the unmistakable sound of a lock engaging. Alone with her thoughts, and the growing certainty that morning would bring either her complete capitulation or her death. She had been trapped in the room for perhaps an hour when she heard it, the soft scrape of metal against metal, coming from somewhere behind the ornate headboard. Someone was working to remove the screws that held the ventilation grate in place. Camila, Lorenzo's voice came through the wall in barely a whisper. Can you hear me? Yes, she breathed, moving closer to the sound. Listen carefully. In 10 minutes, there's going to be a distraction in the main house. Kitchen fire, electrical problem. Something that will draw the guards away from this wing. When it happens, I need you to be ready to run. Lorenzo, they know about the federal investigation. They know everything. Not everything. They don't know about the evidence I've already turned over. They don't know that federal agents are already moving to make arrests tomorrow morning. Camila's heart stopped. Tomorrow? The investigation was never about gathering more evidence. It was about keeping me alive long enough to testify. But they moved up the timeline when they realized my father was getting suspicious. Then why are you here? Why aren't you in protective custody? The pause that followed stretched so long, she thought he might have gone. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with resignation. Because I couldn't leave you to face this alone. The words hit her like a physical blow. You chose me over your own safety. I chose love over everything else. Stupid maybe, but there it is. Through the wall, she could hear sounds of movement, preparation. Whatever Lorenzo was planning would happen soon. What's the distraction going to be? The less you know, the better. Just be ready to run when you hear the fire alarm. Head for the garden. There's a gap in the security fence near the fountain. Car will be waiting on the access road. What about you? I'll be right behind you. But something in his tone suggested otherwise, and Camila felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Lorenzo, promise me you're not planning to do something heroic and stupid. I promise I'm going to do everything I can to get us both out of here alive. It wasn't the promise she had asked for, but before she could press him further, the fire alarm began to blare throughout the house. Emergency lights flickered on, and she could hear shouting from the main wing as guards responded to whatever crisis Lorenzo had created. Now, his voice came through the wall. Go now. Camila didn't hesitate. She kicked off her heels and tried the door handle, finding it unlocked in the confusion. The hallways were empty, filled with smoke that carried the acrid scent of burning electronics. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as she made her way toward what she hoped was the garden exit. Behind her, heard gunshots. The sound stopped. Her in her tracks, every instinct screaming at her to go back, to find Lorenzo, to help him however she could. But his voice echoed in her memory. Just be ready to run. She ran. The garden was chaos. Security guards rushed toward the main house while automated sprinkler systems fought a fire that seemed to be centered in the electrical room. In the confusion, No one noticed a single woman in a black dress sprinting toward the back fence. The gap, Lorenzo had mentioned, was barely wide enough for her to squeeze through, hidden behind an ornamental hedge. As she forced her way through the metal fencing, she felt fabric tear and skin scrape against jagged edges. The access road was exactly where he had said it would be. A nondescript sedan sat with its engine running, driver's door open. But no Lorenzo. More gunshots echoed from the house, closer now. Camila looked back at the estate, every fiber of her being screaming at her to wait, to see if Lorenzo would appear running through the smoke and chaos. But the rational part of her mind, the part trained in psychology and survival, knew that staying would mean both their deaths. She got in the car and drove into the night, leaving behind the man who had chosen love over safety and might have paid for that choice with his life. 6 months later, Camila watched the news coverage from a safe house in Guadalajara. The anchor's voice was professionally neutral as she reported the conclusion of one of Mexico's largest federal investigations into organized crime. Roberto Castellano, heir to the luxury hotel empire, was sentenced today to 45 years in federal prison for money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy charges. His wife Elena Castellano received 30 years for her role in the criminal organization. Screens showed footage of the couple being led away in handcuffs. Their expensive clothes and defiant expressions a stark contrast to their circumstances. Roberto's empire had crumbled in spectacular fashion. It's brought down by evidence provided by federal informants in years of careful investigation. What the news didn't report was the cost of that victory. Camila turned off the television and walked to the kitchen of her small apartment, where a letter sat unopened on the counter. She had been staring at it for 3 days, recognizing the handwriting despite never having seen it before. The return address was a federal correctional facility in Colorado. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope. Camila, the letter began. If you're reading this, then you made it out alive, and I've been placed in witness protection as planned. I know you must have questions about what happened that night, about why I didn't follow you to the car immediately, about whether the sacrifice was worth it. She sank into a chair, her heart pounding as she continued reading. The distraction I created wasn't just about helping you escape. It was about destroying evidence that would have implicated you in the federal investigation. My father had been building a case to frame you as the mastermind behind my cooperation with federal agents. He planned to present you as a psychology student who manipulated his son into betraying family loyalty. Camila's hands shook as the implications became clear. Lorenzo hadn't just been helping her escape that night. He'd been protecting her from prosecution. I set fire to his private office and destroyed those files, but doing so meant staying behind to make sure the job was finished completely. The gunshots you heard were warning shots from security guards, not an execution, though I admit there were a few moments when I wasn't sure which it would be. A bitter laugh escaped her throat. Even in a letter, Lorenzo's dry humor survived. The federal agents moved faster than we anticipated. By dawn, they had arrest warrants for everyone in my father's organization, except you. My testimony, combined with the evidence I had been gathering for months, was enough to bring down the entire operation. The letter went on to explain that Lorenzo was serving a reduced sentence at a minimum security facility, his cooperation having earned him protection and a chance at eventual freedom, but it was the final paragraphs that brought tears to her eyes. I need you to know that everything I told you about loving you was true. I need you to know that choosing to help you escape instead of saving myself was the first truly good decision I've made in my adult life. I need you to know that if I had to do it over again, I would make the same choice. But I also need you to know that I'm not asking you to wait for me. The life you're building now, free from my family's shadow, is the life you always deserved. Don't sacrifice your future for a past that neither of us can change. The letter was signed simply L, but included a phone number and visiting hours. That evening, Camila sat in a small cafe near the University of Guadalajara, where she had transferred to complete her psychology degree. Her textbooks were spread across the table, but she couldn't concentrate on studying. Instead, she found herself thinking about choices and consequences, about love and sacrifice, about the difference between the person she had been 6 months ago and the person she was becoming. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rosa, who had helped arrange her transfer and was now completing her own degree in Mexico City, saw the news about the Castellanos. "Are you okay?" Camila typed back, "I'm alive." "That's more than I expected 6 months ago. Do you regret any of it?" The question sat on her screen, waiting for an answer that felt impossible to give. Did she regret meeting Lorenzo? Did she regret falling in love with someone whose world was built on violence and deception? Did she regret the choices that had led to that terrifying dinner and the desperate escape that followed? "I regret that people had to get hurt," she finally wrote back. "I regret that it took federal investigators and prison sentences to stop Roberto's organization. But I don't regret falling in love with someone who chose to do the right thing when it mattered most." "Are you going to contact him?" Camila stared at Lorenzo's letter, still folded on the table beside her psychology textbook. The rational part of her mind, the part that had helped her survive the last 6 months, whispered that loving someone in prison was another form of trap, that the smart choice was to finish her degree, build her career, and leave the past buried. But the part of her that remembered the genuine fear in Lorenzo's eyes when he talked about her safety, the part that remembered his willingness to sacrifice his freedom for her protection, whispered something different. "Maybe," she typed, "after I graduate," was a compromise between her heart and her head. Between the woman who had fallen in love in dangerous circumstances and the woman who was learning to build a life based on her own strength. 2 years later, Dr. Camila Rodriguez graduated summa cum laude with her doctorate in clinical psychology. The ceremony took place on a sunny afternoon in Guadalajara, with Rosa and her mother Carmen in the audience, beaming with pride at everything she had accomplished. After the ceremony, as other graduates celebrated with their families, Camila sat alone on a bench overlooking the university courtyard. In her purse was a letter she had written but never sent, explaining her feelings about Lorenzo and their impossible situation. In her pocket was her phone, with a number she had memorized, but never dialed. She was still sitting there when Rosa found her. "You're thinking about him, aren't you?" Rosa said, settling onto the bench beside her. "I'm thinking about choices," Camila replied. "About the difference between love and dependency, between loyalty and self-destruction. And what conclusion are you reaching? That some stories don't have neat endings? That sometimes loving someone means accepting that they're part of your past, not your future?" Rosa studied her friend's profile in the golden light of afternoon light. "Or sometimes it means deciding that love is worth fighting for, even when the circumstances are complicated." Camila turned to meet her friend's gaze. "You think I should contact him? I think you should do whatever will let you sleep peacefully for the rest of your life." That night, alone in her apartment with her diploma propped against the kitchen window, Camila finally made her choice. She picked up her phone and dialed the number from Lorenzo's letter. The phone rang 4 times before a familiar voice answered. "Camila, hello, Lorenzo? I wasn't sure you'd ever call." "God, I wasn't sure either." She took a deep breath. "But I needed to tell you something. I'm listening. I graduated today. I'm officially Dr. Rodriguez now." The pride in his voice was unmistakable. "Congratulations. I knew you could do it. I also needed to tell you that I forgive you." "For what?" "For bringing danger into my life, for making me fall in love with someone I couldn't have, for putting me in a position where I had to choose between safety and love." The silence stretched between them across hundreds of miles. "I needed to tell you that I forgive myself too," she continued, "for choosing love over safety, for taking risks that could have gotten me killed, for falling in love with someone whose world was built on violence. Camila, I'm not asking for anything from you, Lorenzo. I'm not promising to wait for you or demanding that you find a way to be part of my life. I'm just saying that what happened between us was real and it changed both of us, and that's worth acknowledging." When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "You saved my life, you know. It's not just that night at the estate. Every conversation we had, every moment you believed I could be better than my family's legacy, gave me the strength to make the right choice when it mattered. We saved each other. Yeah, we did." They talked for another hour, sharing updates about their lives, their hopes, their plans. When the call ended, Camila felt something she hadn't experienced in 2 years. Peace. She didn't know if Lorenzo would be part of her future. She didn't know if love could survive the complications of witness protection and the lingering shadows of organized crime. What she knew was that she had built a life worth living, regardless of whether she lived it alone or with someone else. Standing at her kitchen window, looking out at the lights of Guadalajara, Dr. Camila Rodriguez smiled. I had survived falling in love with danger. She had survived betrayal and escape and the long process of rebuilding her life from nothing, whatever came next. She was ready for it. The end asterisk, like this video if the story touched your heart. Subscribe for more emotional tales and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.